Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They came for my road, not with guns, but with forged maps, midnight sabotage, and HOA lawyers in suits sharper than razors. I built it with my hands. Now they want to steal it on paper, but they messed with the wrong man. This isn't just a driveway, it's war. I still remember the way the mountain air tasted that morning, clean, sharp, and tinged with the faint scent of pine sap. I'd been living on my 20 acres of Colorado hillside for just a few weeks then, trying to settle into a slower rhythm after more than 2 decades of designing highways and drainage systems for the Texas Department of Transportation. When I first set foot on the property, I fell in love with the view, the kind that makes you forget your email inbox exists. The only thing I didn't love was the rutted, rain-chewed excuse for a road that wound from the county highway up toward my cabin. Road was generous. It was more like a suggestion left by whoever last drove a pickup through here 10 years ago. After a few days of bottoming out my suspension and cursing every rock the size of a microwave, I decided I was done playing off-road rally. So I did what any stubborn engineer would do. I drew up plans for a private concrete driveway that would make the DOT smile. It took me 3 months working alongside a small crew I hired, grading the land, cutting drainage channels, installing culverts, pouring the concrete in carefully timed sections to avoid temperature cracking. I spent a small fortune, $100,000 of my own savings. But when the last reflective stripe dried and I drove up that smooth, quiet stretch of concrete for the first time, it felt worth every penny. A man should have the freedom to reach his own front porch without risking cardiovascular catastrophe from stressing over potholes. For about a week, life was bliss. I woke up early, brewed coffee, watched the sunrise slide across the ridge, and took my truck down the freshly made road with the kind of satisfaction normally reserved for new parents and people who assemble IKEA furniture correctly the first time. Then one morning, I opened my mailbox and found an envelope that looked like it had been mailed from the IRS of hell. The letterhead said, Ridgepine Peaks Homeowners Association. I remember blinking a few times, wondering if they had sent this to the wrong person. Ridgepine Peaks was a planned development 2 miles down the slope, a gated enclave of matching timber frame homes and over-vigilant retirees who believed that the world must be protected from unapproved garden gnomes. I had zero relationship with them. I opened the letter anyway. At first, I actually laughed. It claimed I owed $100 debit for usage of community road infrastructure without authorization. According to them, I had been accessing Ridgepine Peaks Transportation Network on multiple documented occasions. Now, unless their transportation network was composed of pine cones and deer droppings, there was no universe in which I had ever driven across their land. My driveway started on my land, ended on my land, and the closest HOA boundary line was far enough away you'd need a telescope to see their mailbox cluster. So I did what any sane person would do. I tossed the letter onto the counter, muttered something about lunatics, and promised myself I'd call them to sort out the mistake later. But life got busy, as it tends to, and I forgot. 5 days later, I found a second envelope, this one stamped Final Warning. The amount had grown to 100 Chestisat tri-dollars, and they now threatened to escalate the matter to enforcement. The tone of the letter felt like it had been written by someone who enjoyed slapping fines on children for breathing too loud. I called the number listed, got an automated menu that wanted me to press 2 to report my neighbor's non-compliant holiday decorations, and gave up when my patience wore thinner than my old truck's tires. The first time I realized this wasn't just a clerical error was the morning I was driving down to the county highway, humming along the curve of my brand new road. As I rounded the last bend, a large white SUV blocked the exit. A beefy guy in a Ridgepine Peaks security vest stepped out, one hand resting on his belt in a way that suggested he'd watched too many action movies. "Morning," I said through my open window, trying to sound polite even though my irritation was simmering close to a boil. "Sir, you are not authorized to use this road," he said, voice flat and rehearsed. I blinked at him. "I built this road." He didn't flinch. "According to the board, access to Ridgepine Peaks infrastructure requires payment. You are in non-compliance." I had to lean back in the seat to make sure I'd heard him correctly. "Infrastructure? Buddy, this is my private driveway. You see that ridge up there? That's my cabin, this concrete. Also mine. There isn't a single Ridgepine Peaks nail within shouting distance of this slope. but he just repeated the same line, like some HOA-programmed cyborg. Payment is required. That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. I was dealing with an organization that had either lost its collective mind or decided to attempt some bold daylight extortion. The security guard eventually moved his SUV when I informed him I'd be calling the sheriff if he didn't. But he drove off slow enough to make sure I got a good look at his HOA badge, like he wanted to tattoo the threat on my memory. Later that day, I went down to the county office. A clerk checked their records, then frowned and rotated her computer monitor toward me. "It shows that Ridge Pine Peaks filed a boundary expansion map this spring," she said. On the screen, a red outline of the HOA's jurisdiction showed my entire driveway included in their zone. According to the file, my land had magically become part of their planned community. I stared at it the way you stare at a rattlesnake wearing a bow tie, confused, disturbed, mildly impressed at the audacity. I knew then that this wasn't going away on its own. They weren't just sending wrong mail, they were claiming ownership over something I had poured my own sweat, money, and concrete into. I walked out of the county building with a tight jaw and a feeling in my gut that this was only the opening move in a very ugly game. I didn't waste time. The moment I got home, I dug out every document I had related to my land. Survey maps, purchase records, county approvals, drainage permits, even the inspection reports from when I poured the retaining culverts. I laid them out on the dining table like it was a murder board and I was hunting down a serial killer. The road, my road, was entirely inside my property lines. It didn't cross HOA land. It didn't even kiss it on the cheek. There was a good 40 yards of pine and scrub between the edge of Ridge Pine Peaks and the beginning of my concrete. But the map I'd seen on the county computer showed something else entirely. A neat, curved finger of red that stretched right up my hillside, swallowing the entire length of my driveway like a snake consuming a sausage. It wasn't just cartographic optimism, it was a hostile rewrite of reality. The next morning, I returned to the county recorder's office and requested a certified copy of that expansion map. The clerk, a tired-looking man with a comb-over that gave up halfway through his scalp, handed it over with a shrug. "Filed by Ridge Pine Peaks HOA, signed and sealed. Says here it was submitted with resident approval." I pointed at the signature block. 3 names were scribbled on it. One of them was mine. "Funny," I said. "I don't recall signing a damn thing." He leaned closer. "You sure that's your signature?" "Positive. I haven't written my name in cursive since high school." I took a photo and texted it to a buddy of mine from Texas, Hal, who used to work in document forensics for the state. He called me 20 minutes later. "Yeah, that's forged. Sloppy, too. It looks like someone traced a signature off a driver's license." He whistled. "You got yourself a live one." I walked out of the recorder's office with the paperwork clutched in one hand and a distinct pounding behind my eyes. Ridge Pine Peaks wasn't just playing dumb, they were playing dirty. By the time I got back to my property, things had escalated. At the bottom of my road, blocking access to the county highway, stood a brand new arm barrier, one of those yellow and white plastic gate arms you see at parking garages. It had a keypad mounted beside it and a sign screwed into a metal post that read, "Private Community Road, Ridge Pine Peaks HA, authorized vehicles only. Contact office to request access." I stared at it for a full minute, mouth slightly open before I laughed out loud. It wasn't a humorous laugh, more like the kind of laugh a man makes after he's been hit in the head with a shovel and handed a balloon animal. This wasn't just bold, it was criminal. I took out my phone and started filming. I got shots of the barrier, the keypad, the sign. Then I walked back up and got aerial footage with my drone, documenting the entire stretch of road from my cabin down to the barrier. No crossings, no shared easements, just my concrete and their damn blockade. I called the sheriff's department. When the deputy showed up, he was polite but cautious. "Sir, this appears to be a civil matter regarding property access. Without clear proof of ownership conflict, we're limited in what we can do." I handed him the certified deed, the county plot map, the HOA's forged submission, and pointed at the barrier. "That's obstruction of a legal roadway," I said flatly. "My roadway. This isn't an alley or a disputed strip. It's my infrastructure. They put that gate on my land." The deputy frowned, flipping through the papers. "Well, okay, yeah. This does look suspect. I can file a report, and we can start a code enforcement request. You'll probably want to bring this to court. No arrests, no citations, just more paperwork. I thanked him anyway and got to work with bolt cutters. The gate didn't stand a chance. 10 minutes later, the arm was lying in a ditch, and I was documenting the removal process on video, narrating calmly in case this ever needed to be played in front of a judge. The next day, Ridge Pine Peaks sent me a letter. Not certified mail this time, hand-delivered in a plastic sleeve, rolled up and shoved into my gatepost. It was printed on thick cream paper and written in what I can only describe as HOA legalese. Dear resident, it has come to our attention that unauthorized alterations have been made to access infrastructure governed by the Ridge Pine Peaks Community Board. Your actions constitute vandalism and may be subject to civil penalties under the Ridge Pine Peaks Covenant Agreement, Section 11, Subsection D. Immediate restitution is expected in the amount of $368 to cover damage to access equipment. Failure to comply may result in lien placement or legal action. No signature, no name. Just a generic community compliance officer. And still, they addressed me as resident, as if I lived in their model home utopia, rather than 50 feet above it, with a Remington and a dog named Asphalt. I made copies of every page and forwarded them to my newly hired lawyer, a sharp woman named Sylvia Grant, who spoke in legal code the way most people spoke about sports scores. Her response was short. They're insane. But we can bury them. She advised me to file an injunction, a formal cease and desist, and begin prepping a countersuit. They're trying to do two things, she explained. 1. Assert jurisdiction over your land by establishing a fake paper trail. 2. Provoke you into overreacting so they can claim you're a threat. Too late, I said. I already took bolt cutters to their gate. She smirked. Good. That means we're not playing defense anymore. The following week was quiet. Too quiet. No more letters, no more guards. But every time I drove that stretch of road, I had the feeling I was being watched. Cars from the HOA's neighborhood started idling near my driveway entrance. One day, a silver Lexus sat parked across the highway with a man inside, snapping photos with a telephoto lens. I raised my coffee mug to him. He didn't wave back. The siege hadn't ended. It had just gone underground. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from fear. There's a kind of anxiety that goes deeper than that. It was the tight, slow burn kind that gets under your ribs when you realize someone is trying to rewrite reality in real time, and you're the only one who knows what's true. The map said I was theirs. The fake signatures said I agreed. The gate said I owed them rent to use my own concrete. It wasn't just harassment anymore. It was a hostile takeover. First thing the next morning, I met Sylvia at the county courthouse. She was already 2 coffees deep and had a folder thick enough to bruise someone. We're filing a preliminary injunction to freeze any enforcement action from the HOA, she said briskly. And I've hired a licensed cadastral surveyor to resurvey your land. If they want to play this game on paper, we'll meet them with paper made out of titanium. That surveyor showed up with a 6-foot tripod, 2 assistants, and the personality of a man who had spent most of his adult life arguing with utility companies. He spent 2 days walking every inch of my boundary line, marking coordinates, and cross-checking against historical plats dating back to the 1950s. His conclusion: Ridge Pine Peaks expansion map was pure fiction. My land remained outside their boundaries, untouched, and the driveway had never intersected with their infrastructure because, surprise, they had none. Their internal transportation network was just their neighborhood loop road, which ended a good 500 feet below my slope. But here's where things got interesting. The expansion map filed by Ridge Pine Peaks had been signed by a man named Jeremy Cross, a name that lit up Sylvia's face like a Vegas jackpot. I know that guy, she said. He used to be a licensed surveyor until the state board stripped his license for falsifying property reports for a condo developer in Steamboat Springs. She pulled the disciplinary report. It detailed how Cross had created fake easements and boundary shifts for a developer trying to push their project onto adjacent private land. The scheme had collapsed after a homeowner caught them sneaking bulldozers across the line. I felt a nasty kind of relief. This wasn't just a local squabble anymore. This was the same playbook, running in a new county. We compiled everything: my legal deed, the new survey, screenshots of the Ridge Pine Peaks filing, and Jeremy Cross's disciplinary record, and Sylvia packaged it into an exhibit. Then she dropped the big one. I'm going to file a petition for declaratory judgment. We'll ask the court to formally affirm your road and your land as independent from any HOA jurisdiction. Once we get that, they can't touch you, period. Won't that take weeks? I asked. Probably, she said, but I'm also filing for a temporary restraining order in parallel. If we get a cooperative judge, you'll have a court order within 72 hours barring them from interfering. It sounded good, solid, professional, aggressive, without crossing a line. I was finally breathing a little easier when my phone buzzed. It was a motion alert from one of my trail cams. I opened the feed. 2 men in high-visibility vests were standing on my road near the midpoint slope, looking over the edge at one of the drainage outlets. One of them had a crowbar. The other had a clipboard. I was in my truck in under a minute. By the time I got there, they were gone, but the evidence wasn't. Someone had taken a sledgehammer to the concrete lip at the mouth of the drainage trough, chipping away enough that it would cause pooling during the next rain. The rebar was exposed. There were tire tracks from a heavy vehicle, likely one of theirs. I checked the side berm and found a pile of gravel dumped across one lane of the road. Not enough to trap a truck, but enough to force you to slow down or think twice. I photographed everything. Damage, gravel, tire treads, a candy wrapper with HOA's landscaper logo printed on it, like they were leaving calling cards now. Sylvia's face turned grim when she saw the images. That's infrastructure sabotage. You can tack on another 7 figures if we go to trial. We filed a police report for vandalism. The deputy this time was a little more attentive, especially after I showed him the drone footage and cam timestamps. You've got solid evidence, he said. We'll forward this to the DA's office. Might qualify as felony property damage, depending on the estimate. I hired an independent civil engineer to assess the repairs. His report came back the next day. Replacing the cracked section, remediating the drainage, and repouring the berm edge would cost just under $12,000. I included the estimate in the injunction paperwork. Sylvia smiled as she stapled it. Now we're not just asking them to back off. We're suing them for damages. By the end of that week, I was the proud plaintiff in a civil suit against Ridge Pine Peaks HOA for obstruction of private infrastructure, fraudulent jurisdiction claims, harassment, and property destruction. The total claim? $2.3 million. I half expected the HOA to retreat. Instead, they doubled down. On Monday, I received another envelope, this time with their law firm's logo printed on the corner. It contained a notice of cross-claim. They were suing me. Their basis: excessive use of Ridge Pine Peaks common infrastructure without authorization, damage to community assets, and, my personal favorite, willful obstruction of shared transportation access resulting in community hardship. Sylvia laughed so hard she had to take off her glasses. They're trying to frame it as you blocking their neighborhood on a road you built that they didn't know existed 6 months ago. The best part? Their claim included a satellite photo of my road with a red line drawn through it, labeled Community Arterial. But the image had a timestamp, taken 3 weeks before the road was even poured. Idiots didn't even Photoshop the fresh concrete in, Sylvia muttered. We updated our countersuit to include fraudulent litigation and misuse of public records. I submitted additional footage from my drone archive showing the road being built step by step, with date stamps and GPS coordinates. Still, despite all the mounting evidence, the HOA hadn't stopped. That night, as I sat on my porch sipping bourbon and listening to the wind rattle the pine branches, I watched a set of headlights crawl slowly up the county highway and pause near my property line. They didn't turn in, just idled, watching, waiting. 3 nights after the gravel stunt and the smashed drainage lip, I woke up at 2:30 in the morning to the sound of metal scraping against concrete. It was distant but deliberate. Too steady to be wildlife, too unnatural to be wind. I slipped on boots, grabbed my flashlight and sidearm, and stepped onto the porch. At first, I couldn't see anything, just the usual shadows thrown by pine trunks and a light breeze shifting the tree canopy. But then I caught it, a flicker of motion down by the lower curve of the road just beyond the second culvert. I killed the porch light, let my eyes adjust, and made my way down the slope in the dark, sticking close to the tree line. As I got closer, I could see 2 figures crouched near the roadside ditch, flashlights in their mouths, hacking at the edge of the poured concrete with what looked like chisels. A third figure stood watch near a parked utility truck. No markings, no plate lights, nothing identifiable. I hit record on my phone and let it run. They didn't see me until I stepped out of the trees with the flashlight beam full in their faces. "You lost?" I called out. The reaction was instant. Tools dropped, flashlights scattered, and all three scrambled into the truck. I managed to catch a blurry shot of the license plate as they peeled away, fishtailing gravel onto the edge of my berm. By morning, I'd found the damage. They'd tried to chisel a trench into the edge of the roadway, probably to undermine the subgrade and let water in. It wasn't deep, but it was wide enough to cause a tire dip or crack under freeze cycles. Another section had been spray painted with a neon pink X that I'm guessing was meant to market for future demolition. This wasn't just vandalism, this was systematic sabotage. I filed another report with the sheriff's department, provided the video, and added it to our case file. Sylvia's voice on the phone was flat. "That's premeditated destruction. They're escalating. We need to talk to the DA." She wasn't wrong. We weren't just dealing with overzealous board members anymore. This was targeted property interference, carried out in the dead of night by people who didn't care if they were seen. Later that afternoon, while I was reviewing camera footage and drone angles, I received a call from a man named Harris Brinkley. He introduced himself as an independent contractor who'd done landscaping work for Ridgepine Peaks until recently. His voice was nervous but direct. "Listen," he said, "I saw your story in the paper. You're the road guy, right? The one suing them." "That's me." "Well, I think you should know they asked me to haul a load of gravel to a GPS pin up your slope about 2 weeks ago. Didn't seem like an HOA job. Cash under the table. I refused. But I know a couple other guys who didn't." "You willing to give a statement?" A long pause. "I'll think about it. But watch your stuff, man. They're not just trying to fine you. They're trying to push you out." It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was fact. The next morning, I found a pile of yard debris dumped at the top of my road. Bags of leaves, old fence panels, even a few half-rotted 204s with rusty nails. On the side of one plank, someone had spray-painted "Community Right-of-Way." I left it all untouched and called in another drone pass, documenting the scene from every angle. Sylvia filed an emergency motion with the district court, citing ongoing harassment, property damage, and threats to safety. We requested a protective order against Ridgepine Peaks HOA officers and contractors, along with a temporary injunction preventing any personnel from coming within 100 yards of my property boundary. It was granted within 24 hours. At the hearing, the judge, a no-nonsense former military lawyer named Goodwin, took one look at the submitted photos and videos and said, "This looks like organized intimidation. I'm not waiting for someone to get hurt." That same day, I drove into town to grab supplies. When I returned, a new sign had been erected just off the county highway, near the HOA entrance. It was made to look official, but the paint was sloppy and the framing crooked. In stenciled red letters, it read, "Caution, unauthorized private road. Use at your own risk. Subject to community regulation." I didn't even slow down. Just drove right past it and up my concrete ribbon like nothing had happened. But the rage boiled beneath the surface. Every act of sabotage, every fake claim, every passive-aggressive signpost, they were trying to grind me down until I either gave up or broke character. I wasn't planning to do either. The next escalation came less than 48 hours later. That morning, I was halfway through welding a custom no trespassing gate post for the top of the road when I heard the rumble of tires on gravel. A Ridgepine Peaks SUV was coming up the drive. Inside were 2 board members and a new face, a man in a blue suit carrying a legal portfolio. They pulled up and got out like they owned the damn slope. The woman in front introduced herself as Marcy Leeds, Vice Chair of Community Oversight. She smiled like a python about to explain your rights. "We're here to serve you notice of a cease and desist," she said, handing over a folder with the HOA seal on it. "Your unapproved roadway has been classified as a non-compliant surface under Ridgepine Peaks Section 9. You're ordered to halt any construction or modification efforts pending review." I didn't take the folder. Instead, I pointed to the drone on the tripod behind me, spinning silently above their heads. "Do me a favor," I said. "Wave to the judge. He'll enjoy this." The lawyer flinched. Marcy's smile faltered. I didn't say anything else. Didn't need to. They turned and left without another word. Back inside, I finally opened the folder. Their complaint was laughable, claiming environmental disruption, visual pollution, even reduced harmony of neighborhood character. Most of the language had been copied from HOA boilerplate meant for mailbox violations. Sylvia nearly choked on her coffee when I scanned it to her. "They're circling the drain," she said. They've got no case. But if they're this desperate, I guarantee they'll do something stupid soon." She was right. They weren't done. And I was just getting warmed up. I knew they were going to try something reckless soon. I just didn't expect it to be broad daylight stupid. The following Monday, around 11 in the morning, I was finishing a drone sweep of the road's south culvert when I caught movement on the live feed. 3 construction trucks, flatbeds with gravel, a water tanker, and a bobcat on a trailer were idling just past the Ridgepine Peaks entrance. Behind them, a white SUV with an HOA placard in the windshield. I dropped everything, jumped into my truck, and tore down the slope. By the time I reached the road entrance, they were unloading gravel directly onto the southern drainage shoulder, the same one I'd built to spec, with geotextile membrane and slope protection. One of the workers was pulling a string line across my pavement, like they were about to dig a trench for a pipe. The woman directing it all? Karen Fowles, HOA president, sun hat, clipboard, and her trademark smugness. I got out of the truck and walked right up to her. "You lost again, Karen?" I asked, voice level. "No," she said flatly. "You are. This is part of the revised community master plan. You were notified. This area is being upgraded to meet Ridgepine safety and access standards." I laughed. Out loud. It echoed against the hills. "You're building on my land, my road, my registered infrastructure. You didn't notify me. You trespassed." Again. She didn't flinch, just waved a paper in my face, some ridiculous printout labeled Parcel Access Overlay Community Shared Use. It wasn't a legal map. It wasn't signed. It wasn't even dated. I turned to the workers. "Gentlemen, stop what you're doing. Right now. This is private property. You're violating a court order and could be arrested." They hesitated. One of them looked at Karen, who nodded aggressively, but they didn't move. That's when I pulled my phone and hit dial. "Yeah, Sheriff, it's Travis. You'll want to send a deputy up here fast. I've got unauthorized construction on my property. Same HOA crew." "Yes, I have video." Again. Karen's face finally cracked. "You don't want to do this," she hissed. "Oh, I already did." The workers packed up in under 15 minutes. Karen stormed off, still clutching her pretend paperwork like it was the Constitution. When the sheriff's deputy arrived, I gave him the footage from the drone and body cam. He grimaced when he saw the gravel being dumped over my engineered shoulder. "Blatant violation," he muttered. "Judge Goodwin's not going to like this." He filed a report and said it would be added to the open case. I spent the next 3 hours clearing debris from the site and inspecting for damage. They'd scratched up the concrete at the tie-in point and compromised a slope anchor. Another repair I'd have to make myself. More labor, more costs. But that wasn't the worst of it. That evening, a knock came at my door. It was Harris Brinkley, the landscaper who'd called me the week before. This time, he showed up in person, nervous, looking over his shoulder every few minutes. "I'm in," he said quietly. "I'll testify." I invited him in. He laid it out fast. Karen had been paying unlicensed contractors cash to do off-books maintenance along roads that weren't HOA property. She had a guy forging inspection reports to justify fees. And most importantly, she'd told several board members that once she got Travis under HOA control, she'd push for mandatory assessments, new dues for road upkeep, for everyone nearby, even non-members. "She's expanding the HOA through the back door," Harris said, "and she's using your road as the wedge." He signed a sworn affidavit right there in my kitchen. Sylvia was ecstatic when I called. "This changes everything," she said. "Witness testimony plus video plus police reports? We're not just looking at civil court now. This smells like fraud, extortion, and possibly racketeering." The next morning, we filed an updated complaint with the DA's office, attaching the affidavit, construction footage, and maps of the encroachment. By noon, the county issued a cease-work order against Ridgepine Peaks HOA for any off-parcel construction. The sheriff's department followed up with a formal warning. Any further violations would result in arrests. Karen responded like a wounded animal. First came the letters, certified mail, envelopes labeled HOA legal action in process. All nonsense. Then, neighbors started calling me. "Calvin, did you really sue the whole HOA? I heard they're trying to claim your land is public now. Someone said you're going to block the only road in and out." It was clear she was spreading rumors, trying to make me the villain. But it didn't land. Most of my neighbors knew better. Some even offered to testify on my behalf, having seen HOA members sneak onto my land or block the road with equipment. Still, I wasn't about to let public opinion settle the matter. I called in a licensed cadastral surveyor, state certified, and commissioned a full boundary report with 3D LiDAR overlays. I wanted everything: road center line, drainage extent, slope easement, soil rights, every square foot accounted for. When the results came in, they were devastating. Not only was the road entirely within my deeded land, but the HOA's recently filed expansion plat had crossed into 3 other private parcels, none of which had ever agreed to it. The geodetic data didn't match county records. The signatures on the plat, at least 2 were forged. We took that to the county recorder and filed a motion to suspend the plat's recognition pending criminal investigation. By the end of the week, Karen was subpoenaed for deposition. She tried to delay it, claimed illness, but the court didn't buy it. I showed up to the deposition with a binder 2 inches thick and a drone video cued on a tablet. Karen arrived with a lawyer and a scowl. She lasted 39 minutes before invoking the 5th. Sylvia smiled at me across the table. We didn't need her to confess. The paper trail would do it for us. The fallout from Karen's deposition was immediate. 2 days after she pleaded the 5th, the county recorder's office issued a formal suspension of the Ridgepine Peaks expansion plat. A red banner was placed across the online map interface. Under investigation, do not reference for boundary determinations. Just like that, the HOA's fake authority vanished from every public record it had infected. But Karen wasn't done. Not by a long shot. That weekend, I woke up to the hum of machinery. Not just engines, concrete saws, jackhammers. I grabbed my boots, threw on a coat, and ran outside. What I saw nearly made me black out from sheer fury. A crew, 4 men in unmarked jumpsuits, was actively cutting a section of my concrete road near the main turnoff. The rebar was already exposed. They had water sprayers going, a backhoe idling nearby, and a portable sign that read Emergency Utility Access, authorized by Ridgepine HOA. They'd taken torches to my work. They were dissecting my road. I didn't yell. I didn't even walk up to them. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and walked a wide arc, filming every angle. License plates, faces, equipment labels. Then I dialed the sheriff. Again. The operator sounded tired of hearing my voice, but promised deputies were en route. This time I stood back. Let them keep working, because the more they touched, the deeper they dug themselves. When the deputies arrived 20 minutes later, I handed over my phone. One of the crew tried to claim they were doing authorized trenching for utilities. I asked a simple question. Which utility company? He blinked like a deer in headlights. Couldn't name one. Couldn't produce a work order. Just kept repeating, we were told the HOA approved it. The deputies detained all 4 of them on the spot for trespassing and property damage. Then things got even more interesting. Later that afternoon, Sylvia called me from the courthouse, breathless. They're moving to freeze the HOA's operating funds. DA filed an emergency injunction after your footage came in. Turns out one of those guys is linked to a demolition company Karen hired for a different illegal expansion 2 years ago. So, we had repeat offenders, unlicensed excavation, and no permits. The damage was severe. Over 20 linear feet of pavement destroyed, drain pipe cracked, slope base undermined. My engineer friend came out the next morning and assessed it all. Repair cost, at minimum, $42,000. I added it to the damages report. Our lawsuit ballooned again. Now came the real war. Karen sent out letters to all HOA members claiming I had sabotaged community infrastructure and was obstructing essential upgrades. I managed to get my hands on one, courtesy of a neighbor who'd had enough. It was full of legal gibberish and outright lies. She even accused me of aggressive behavior toward Ridgepine contractors, which would have been hilarious if it weren't defamatory. That's when I decided to go fully public. I uploaded drone footage of the attack to a private site, added timestamps, commentary, and document links, my deed, the permit approvals, the court orders. Then I shared the link with every property owner bordering Ridgepine Peaks. I didn't editorialize. I didn't accuse anyone. I just showed the facts. The response was volcanic. Over a dozen people reached out, some shocked, some angry, and a few terrified. Turns out, I wasn't the only target. Karen had been quietly fining landowners for using old ranch roads, claiming they were HOA maintained even though none of them were. One man had paid over $600 in access fees across 2 years just to avoid confrontation. Now the dominoes began to fall. A former Ridgepine board member, Annabelle Curtis, called me directly. She sounded shaken. I resigned last spring when I saw Karen's maps, she said. She was expanding HOA jurisdiction without votes, just filing things at the county level, betting no one would notice. She said, "You can't fight what's already in the records." But I kept copies, emails, signed drafts. My heart skipped. "You still have them. I'll bring them to your lawyer. I want this over." Annabelle's archive was a goldmine. It showed Karen had personally altered digital plat maps using third-party software to simulate boundaries that didn't exist. She'd then presented these altered files to the board without noting that they hadn't been recorded or surveyed. One message even suggested she planned to digitally nudge property lines in order to encourage annexation compliance. Sylvia called it the smoking gun. The DA called it fraudulent manipulation of public records. And then, finally, Karen got arrested. It happened on a Thursday morning. She was stepping out of a nail salon when two deputies approached and placed her in cuffs. Charges were filed within the hour: felony fraud, document tampering, conspiracy to defraud property owners, and criminal mischief. The news spread like wildfire. Local papers picked it up. Reddit threads popped up under HOA horror stories. One headline read, "Colorado HOA president charged in road ownership scam." I didn't smile when I read it, but I did exhale for the first time in weeks. Karen's arrest didn't end things. It only threw gasoline on the fire. A week later, a lawyer representing Ridge Pine Peaks filed a countersuit against me, claiming emotional distress and economic harm caused by my public disclosures. They wanted me to take the drone footage down and pay damages. I laughed. My attorney didn't. We filed a motion to dismiss and added their suit as more evidence of harassment. Meanwhile, the criminal case against Karen moved fast. With Annabelle's emails and the forged maps now in the hands of the DA, Karen's bail was revoked. The HOA's remaining board resigned within days. County inspectors visited the destroyed road site and confirmed everything in my engineer's report. Then came the best part. A judge declared the fake expansion map legally void. By month's end, Ridge Pine Peaks HOA was suspended from operating, their bank accounts frozen, and my road recertified as private infrastructure, untouchable by any HOA authority. They thought it was over, that after the HOA collapsed and Karen sat behind bars, I'd move on quietly. But I wasn't done. I'd built this road with my own hands, with my own money, on my own land. And I wasn't about to let some half-baked board or the next Karen in waiting try this again with someone else. So, I filed a petition with the County Planning Commission. It proposed a formal legal precedent that any privately built road on non-HOA land, legally surveyed and approved, could never fall under HOA jurisdiction, past, present, or future. I called it the Travis Road Act. At first, they laughed. Then they read the case files, saw the footage, the forensic maps, the signed affidavits. Suddenly, they weren't laughing. They were drafting. Within 3 months, the Travis Road Act passed county vote. 6 months later, the state added it to the infrastructure code. It was official. My headache became law. I put up a new sign at the road entrance. Private road. Built, owned, and defended by C. Travis. Trespassers will be sued. That road cost me over $130,000, 2 broken drainage lines, 6 months of legal warfare, and more gray hair than my divorce. But it was mine. And now, it couldn't be taken. Not by some HOA, not by a forged map, not by anyone. I still get letters from people who've heard my story. Some dealt with similar scams. Some just wanted to say thanks. A few asked for help. I don't mind. I didn't plan on becoming the guy who took on the HOA machine and won. But if the boots fit, I'll walk the damn road. After all, I built it.